Hey friends, welcome back to my channel, Beautiful Minutia. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany, and today I wanted to do the coffee and books tag because that's like two of my favorite things in the world, coffee and books, and there's absolutely nothing better to me than to read a book while drinking coffee. I first saw this video from Holly over at Lovely Day with Holly, so I will go ahead and link her video down below, as well as the original if I can find it. I'm not sure who originally created this tag. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Number one is Black Coffee, a series that's tough to get into but has hardcore fans. And I am gonna say Lord of the Rings for this one. I know a lot of people really struggle to get into Lord of the Rings, particularly like Fellowship of the Ring. The very beginning just has like a lot of stories and backstory, and then you get to like Tom Bombadil and there's lots of songs and there's lots of poetry throughout it. So there's a lot of people who really struggle to get into Lord of the Rings. But it's funny because in terms of hardcore fans, I am a hardcore Lord of the Rings fan, and I'm also a black coffee drinker. So it's kind of funny that those two kind of like went together in this. But I personally feel like Lord of the Rings is well worth the effort of, you know, some of the archaic language and just the longevity of some of the stories and tales and poetry. The world that Tolkien created is like so immersive and so wonderful, but the storyline to me is even better. So highly recommend it. But if Lord of the Rings feels like too much for you, start with The Hobbit. Lots of people are totally fine reading The Hobbit who can't quite get into Lord of the Rings. So, you know, at least you're getting Tolkien in some way. Prompt number two is Peppermint Mocha. Name a book that gets more popular during the winter or a festive time of year. So I'm feeling a little basic here, but the first thing that came to mind is A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. And then I also have Cricket on the Hearth. And it says other short stories. I read Cricket on the Hearth, and it's not really very much of a Christmas story, and I actually didn't really like it. It's like the only thing I've ever read by Charles Dickens that I really didn't like at all. But these were the first ones that came to mind. I also thought of Little Women because I feel like it opens at Christmas time, even though it spans years and all kinds of different seasons. But I couldn't think of like anything very creative, especially anything that's actually on my shelves. So we're going with Dickens. Question number three is Hot Chocolate, a favorite children's book. And I have talked at length about some of my favorite children's books on this channel. As a child, The Secret Garden was probably my all-time favorite book. But I decided to kind of like mix it up a little bit and mention a book that I don't think I've talked about on my channel, but I think a lot of you have probably read it anyway, and that's Sweep by Jonathan Auxier. I love this book so much. It was one of my favorite books of 2020, and oh my goodness, I laughed, I cried, I loved everything about it. It is about a girl who is a chimney sweep, and she kind of has this like encounter with like this magical thing, so that's definitely a factor of the story. But just like the beauty of like the depiction of the time period takes place in, and then just like how tragic it was with like children being chimney sweeps, and how much the author actually took from actual like historically what was happening at that time, and all the research that he did into the time period really shows in this book. And it just made it that much more deep and immersive, and honestly that much more sad also. So if you haven't read Sweep, I know it's a middle grade book, but even if you don't read middle grade, you need to read Sweep. It is just so good. The next prompt on here is a double shot of espresso. Name a book that kept you on the edge of your seat from start to finish. This is going to be kind of a controversial pick, I think, but I went with Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson. This is book 2 in the Mistborn trilogy, and lots of people love the first book and lots of people love the third book. But the second book kind of gets a lot of hate because a lot of people feel like it is more slower paced than the other books, and I actually disagree. Like I can see where people are coming from because a lot of the action in this book is very political in nature, but I loved it. I could not put it down once I started it, and I just like loved it. This one and the first book. Surprisingly, book 3 actually took me a while to get into, and I struggled with a lot of aspects of it, so I didn't like ultimately love everything about how things were resolved in the trilogy. But oh man, Well of Ascension is probably one of my favorite books of all time. I loved it so much, and the twists and reveals in it were just like, I just didn't see any of them coming, and I just think that Sanderson is a master world builder. Prompt number 5 is Starbucks, a book you see everywhere. And I don't really have anything on my shelves right now that qualify for this because like I don't buy a whole lot of new releases, to be honest. A lot of new releases that I see people talking about are contemporaries, and I'm not a huge contemporary fan, kind of like have a love-hate with it sometimes. But a book that I have seen everywhere is People We Meet on Vacation by, I think it's Emily Henry, maybe. I don't remember for sure. She also wrote, what was it, Beach Read? I don't know. I'm not a romance fan when it comes to just like reading things in the romance genre, so I have no interest in reading this book, but both of the books she came out with were definitely like intended to be like summer reads. So I feel like everybody has been reading People We Meet on Vacation. So yeah, I'm seeing it everywhere, and I don't plan on reading it, so give me some solidarity in the comments. Let me know I'm not alone if you're not reading People We Meet on Vacation either. Prompt number 6 is a hipster coffee shop. Give a book by an indie author a shout out. And when I first saw this, I was kind of struggling because I don't have a lot of books by indie authors on my shelves. But I do have this one, and I'm gonna share it. So this is the Lula and Todd Discover series by Judy Pickrell. And Judy Pickrell was actually like on staff as pastor at the church that we attended for 3 years when we last lived in Illinois. And I love Judy so much. I have said like ever since I met her that like I want to be her when I grow up. She's just like so passionate about the Lord and prayer, and just one of the most loving, passionate people I have ever met. So she has a series of 4 books for children, and it's about these like cute little mice, and they go on different adventures. It is a series, but the books are not, they're all standalone, so you don't have to read them in any particular order whatsoever. In fact, this is not book 1. My daughter has the other ones off somewhere and has been reading them, so this was the only one I could find. But I still wanted to shout her out because she is just an incredible person, and all the books have a lot of spiritual merit to them. So yeah, you can find them on Amazon, so I will link them below in the description, so that way if you're interested in checking them out, you can. They are definitely Christian books, so keep that in mind if that is, you know, not something that you're interested in or something that turns you off. But they're super cute and just really nice, and if Judy ever makes it famous someday, she signed and wrote a message to Claire in the front of each of these books, so that's really kind of cool. But yeah, I love Judy, so definitely go support her. Prompt number 7 is, oops, I accidentally got decaf. Name a book you were expecting more from. First of all, can we just say that if I accidentally got decaf, I would be devastated. It wouldn't just be like, oh, I was expecting more. It would be like, my day is ruined. So this is a very recent read, really fresh in my head, and I still happen to have the library book, so this is the one that we're going with. Because if a book really disappointed me, I didn't keep it. So we're going with Collision of Lies. I just talked about this in a recent reading vlog, so this is kind of redundant if you have watched that. And you can go there and just hear more of my thoughts on it. But basically, all of my friends who had read this book all gave it 5 stars, raved about it, and were like, this is just amazing. So first of all, that's like, you know, mistake number 1 is that I go into a book that is like super hyped and I'm just like, I'm gonna love this book because it's like whenever a book is super hyped and my expectations are high, it's kind of hard for books to meet that expectation. They still do sometimes, but unfortunately, this was not one of them. This is, I think it's like supposed to be like Christian suspense, but there's like absolutely nothing Christian about it at all, which that was not why I was disappointed with it. I'm just like throwing that out there. If you care, if you try to avoid Christian fiction, this is not really Christian in any way. In this case, I think it just means that it's a clean book. So it says suspense on it, but I was expecting a psychological thriller. So that really let me down. So it had like a lot of improbable things in the beginning of it. And then like there are like these reveals, but some of the reveals are so obvious. And then the one that's not obvious is like super scientific, really technical, and very confusing. And the book itself was like super readable. So it was really strange and off-putting. And yeah, it wasn't what I was expecting. It was fine. It was entertaining to an extent, but I seriously doubt that this is a book that I will like ever remember even like what the plot is. It just wasn't memorable or anything super special for me. So yeah, I was hoping this was going to be a 5-star for me also, and it was only a 3. So there were things I did like about it. So not trying to bash it by any means, but it was not as disappointing as decaf coffee. I'll put it that way. It definitely wasn't as disappointing as decaf coffee. But it was like, if you're expecting really good coffee and your coffee just doesn't quite live up to it, I guess. I don't know. It just felt like middle of the road for me. And the very last prompt, number 8, is The Perfect Blend, a book or series that was both bitter and sweet, but ultimately satisfying. And the very first book that popped into my head was The Yearling. I went into this book 100% blind. I didn't even know that the yearling was a deer. Like, it's right on the cover, but I just literally knew absolutely nothing about the yearling at all. I had just heard some friends of mine talk about how beautiful the nature descriptions in it were. So I went into this, that was all I knew, and they weren't wrong. It is very beautifully written, but there is just some really heavy stuff in it too. But I felt like it was handled so beautifully and so well. Like, there's so much growing up that happens in the main character in this book, and just grappling with pain and grief, and oh my goodness, it made me cry a lot in more than one place. There were several very sad parts in this book, and I'm just really thankful I read it. It was one of my favorite books that I read last year, and yeah, definitely had some bitter moments and some sweet moments, and yeah, I just wanted to hug it when I finished. So that's it. That is the book and coffee tag, and so I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. If what your answers would have been for some of these questions. I will try to remember to put all the questions in the descriptions, so that way if you want to look at them, you can. If you have done this tag before, please let me know, because I would absolutely love to watch it and see what your answers are. And if you're a booktuber and you haven't done this tag, let me know if you do, because I don't know, it's just fun to see what other people's answers are for tags, especially the ones that I kind of felt like I was blanking on and couldn't think of like anything creative for, like the Peppermint Mocha one. Like, would love to hear what other people's like wintry suggestions are. I mean, winter's a long way off, but winter is like one of my favorite times of the year to read, because it's just so cozy. So I always like seeing, you know, wintry recommendations. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit the thumbs up button. It really does help with the YouTube algorithm. And subscribe so you can continue to see more bookish content from me. And I will see you again next time.